the Valley Current.
Oh, you got a Zoom room now. Wow, you're ahead of the curve, man. That's an impressive thing. Soon you'll have your AI room with all your AI robots in it. It's going to happen, Steve. You're going to have them chained to their desk. So you have a Zoom room, which I think most people don't have, a separate room to just do your Zoom stuff on a confidential basis outside all the other data that's in your data room or your main work room, right?
Well, our security is constantly being tested and is highly regulated. So,
right. You're doing the highly secure thing. I'm impressed. So we're just going to spend a few minutes getting your opinion about something that I keep hearing is happening, which is that all these companies are adopting bookkeepers and even accountants and even tax accountants to be able to do CPA-like work via AI, which, of course, as lawyers, we also think, well, if they get the accountants, they'll get the lawyers too, for sure. We're all going down the same ship. And I kind of said to you, what do you think? Because it looked like there was a company that was going to release a product next year that they said really was going to change the profession entirely, which is hard to
believe. Well, I'd like to go back to the beginning here and mention this book called The Big Four by Ian Gao and Stuart Kells.
Yeah.
And
the big four accounting firms, right?
They trace the history of accounting back to the 13th century and the Medici family.
They had a lot of money. They had a lot of money to count.
They did. They had their own bank, the Medici Bank, to help finance the establishment of new church parish operations,
right?
Where a newly designated priest would have to obtain financing to cover the initial payroll and whatnot.
Right.
And
so it's been around. So accounting's been around for centuries. Computers came into the picture, I want to say earliest, maybe 1950s, really, and 1960s for sure, because COBOL was revving up on mainframes and mini computers. 1970s, we see the PC era.
And the big deal was, and this really got highlighted in the Industrial Revolution with the railroads in Great Britain. And they started to need to track not just the money and the P&L, the income and outflow, but the equity, where the money is coming from.
Right.
And that led to double entry bookkeeping, where you've got the debit side on the left and the credit, which deals with the stuff and the expenses, and the credit side on the right, which deals with the income and the equity. And the equity is basically keeping track of where the stuff came from.
Right.
And the stuff needs to match where it came from. And when that happens, the debits equal the credits, and it's called being in balance. And then there's 2 or 3 other checks, which are on the tax return, called M1, M2, and M3, which basically check to make sure that the book income reconciles to the tax income, that the previous year reconciles to the current year, and that everything reconciles on a public company tax return. And they tried to do this with AI recently with the bookkeeping, just the bookkeeping, not the tax, not the legal, just simple debits and credits, with a company called Bench, which just went under.
Bench?
Yes, Bench.
BENCH?
Yes, an equity, a VC-funded unicorn that received, I forget exactly, I think it was nearly $100 million in venture capital financing,
Wow.
and they couldn't get the bookkeeping right. In particular, the equity.
Wow.
They couldn't get it right.
Wow.
I'll give you an example of what you need to do to get the bookkeeping right, and that's every time you release books to a regulator, to a CPA, or to a tax preparer, you need to lock the books, and that's called an accounting close. Because if you don't do that, you might accidentally find a receipt from 20 years ago and enter it dated 20 years ago, and then the last 20 years worth of reporting to your authorities is now invalidated because none of that reporting included this new receipt that you just entered.
Right.
And so how do you get an AI bookkeeping system that's entirely AI that's able to close the books?
Yeah, it's a human activity is really your point.
Right. It's a control over human activities. And, many bookkeepers today don't know to do this. And so it's very common that CPAs get what's called out-of-period errors. It's one of the things we check for. It happens with basically until our clients are well-trained, until their human bookkeepers are well-trained, this will happen 20% of the time that there's an out-of-period entry, and it's almost impossible to fix because you don't know when it happened, and all 20 years are broken, and you don't know exactly when. And usually, when there's an error, you can do a binary search. Is it between January and June? Is it between July and December?
Right.
Well, it has to be one of the two, but if it's out of period, it could be any of the 20 years you've been in operation. Tell me, do you have your records from 20 years ago? Because that's what I'll need to fix it correctly.
That's not going to happen in this lifetime, that's for sure. Maybe in another
you didn't
lifetime.
Keep your records from 20 years ago.
I guess the theory is that blockchain and digital storage will somehow save all those archives over all that lengthy period of time, and there's going to be some automatic digital balancing system, which you're saying that ain't going to happen anytime really soon, but it's a Jetsons-like theory. Jetsons was that cartoon of the future, meet George Jetson, his boy Elroy. They basically were able to have flying cars and whatnot back in the 1950s, maybe 1960s. It's a famous cartoon strip. It was before you were born, I think, Steve. But conceptually,
I got to see reruns.
I'll send you the link. They're all on YouTube. It's like 182 episodes. It's really, really funny stuff, too. It's really stuff of the future. It's very futuristic. It's a very futuristic program, very futuristic cartoon. And many people say it's the basic source of a lot of the ideas that are coming out right now. But in this magic world, there's so much automation that somehow all these digital records are just perfectly synced and just work. It all just works perfectly. There's no human in the loop needed. Everything just is perfectly closed, perfectly handled, perfectly this, perfectly that. And then you can get a perfect tax return with all the right judgments made by the AI. I mean, that's the theory. That's their theory. I think we're saying that just sounds like George Jetson and his boy Elroy, in the Jetsons. I think it's just very futuristic thing.
I'd like to see them get the bookkeeping right if they're going to try and get the tax right, because the tax is built on the bookkeeping, and then the law is built on the tax. And so kind of need to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run. So I don't see my function or your function being replaced by AI in this decade. Who knows? Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Think about it as, will there be for simple returns such a thing? Really simple returns where the information is pretty thin and it is a substantial number, that sort of thing, that saves dollars and time saved.
I think that there are simple situations which it might be able to handle, and Sometimes even something as simple as getting a Zoom connection to work.
So the Jetsons were very much about this very futuristic family that was able to have, flying cars and phones that recognize voice and so on. It was back in the 1950s. So it was a long time ago, like basically 70 or so plus years ago. And it's like the futuristic view of what happens to the professions, the accountants, the lawyers, maybe even priests. Like basically we all go away because there's an AI for that. Like an AI is going to do it, and the AI are going to be part of your work staff. In fact, there was something where McDonald's announced that they're going to have these Ronald McDonald cashiers, robots, to handle the money at the point of making change and whatnot, at the point of service. That's all playing out in real time as we speak. But your point is that just can't happen for accounting as we know it, right?
Not anytime soon.
Certainly
not this tax season.
It won't be this tax season for sure. And it probably won't be until there really is some digital certainty about the data, right? And probably it'd be like very, very simple stuff that most people, maybe can get away with. I mean, I thought that was what the tax software did already for most simple people that use it, because they said something about the IRS is now going to have a link where you can do it yourself right on the IRS website. I thought I read that too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's a big deal, right? Isn't it?
That was before this Doge decided to substantially
they cut all the support people out.
They cut all that tech stuff out of the IRS, and we'll see.
So you think the website probably won't work, right?
Probably not next year, no.
Next year, maybe they'll get away with it this year. But I think you make a very persuasive case that there are a lot of judgment calls that have to be made that are kind of outside the computer system, right? They're not in the computer system, and you can't get them in the computer system. I don't think you can. Maybe you can, right? That's the issue. Can you somehow internalize them into the system itself?
No.
Right. Because the interesting fact is that's what we do when we train people. We train them, whether they're a young accountant or a young lawyer, to kind of learn where the judgment calls are and how to weigh the pros and cons of the judgment call that's being made. And that's called mentorship. Used to be really the way things worked in a guild-like approach where you couldn't even get your license until you did the mentorship. That used to be the way it worked. Then law schools came in and bar exams and a bunch of other stuff that thought they were printing lawyers accordingly. But, the truth is young lawyers know they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know a lot of stuff. So it becomes kind of an interesting period of time because they're not necessarily getting the training. And maybe the view is the AI is going to do the training too, right? At some level. There's certainly a lot of courses online, that's for sure. Well, Steve, you've been the light of the afternoon here. I appreciate you making time.
Well, I hear the Medici family calling.
Nice. Hey, so tell people how they can reach you if they have a tax problem that you can solve, which is most of them, right? Most of the time.
Yeah. So my cell phone is 408-887-6433. My email is srabin, that's SRABIN @srabin.com. And you can go to my website, www.srabin.com or www.taxservice2u.com. That's the number 2 and the letter U.com.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks for spending part of your Friday afternoon with me, and I look forward to seeing you sometime maybe next month.
After April 16th.
Oh, that's right. After April 16th. Let me qualify that. After April 16th. All right, take care.
Thanks again for having me on your show.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.